Today I want to talk to you about Anna Komnene's historical objectivity. Many people have tried their hand at writing historical works. In the medieval era, historians were predominantly male, aristocrats, or clergy. They wrote with an agenda or were writing to advance their careers in the civil service. It is rare to come across a female historian, but in the early 12th century we find just that. Anna Komnene was the daughter of the Roman Emperor Alexios Komnenos. She grew up in the palace and was by all accounts a very erudite child. She was taught in the palace and learned history, literature, and rhetoric and language. By the time she was an adult, she had learned how to write in a type of Attic Greek, which she used to write her history, the Alexiad, a history of her father's reign, written as an Attic Greek history, in imitation of those of Herodotus and Thucydides. Many historians criticize her writing as blatantly biased, meant to glorify her father, and having little to no primary sourcing. These are reasonable objections, but I believe these criticisms to be unjust and ignore the historical context and norms of the time. Anna Komnene's story is likely not as subjective as people claim, because she includes things like embarrassing events that tarnish her father's reign. She has to balance the familial duty of her society that her society expected of her to show, and because she had access to many first-hand sources, notably the history written by her late husband. In the context of the period, historical texts were not written how we write them in the modern world. In the modern world, we write history to document and tell stories of our predecessors. We focus on the objectivity of the author, the reliability of the sources, and sound narratives. While these characteristics were not absent from medieval historical works, different attributes were valued more. In the 12th century, an author focused on their strength of character rather than objectivity as a source of legitimation. Authors of historical works often did not even write them to educate others, but as a sort of CV for the civil service or church. Histories were written to advance one's place in the administration, therefore, including embarrassing details about said administration was surely a one way ticket to being passed over for a promotion or even a demotion. Anna, in the context of the period, should be considered as an outlier, as she actively strove for objectivity in her work by including things that might have tarnished the image of the regime. The most notable example of this is in a battle that Anna reports on. Her father, Alexios, is fighting against the Pechenegs and is routed in a battle. Alexios had brought with him to this battle one of the holiest objects in Byzantine Christianity, the icon of the Veil of the Theotokos. During the route, during the rout, Anna tells us that Alexios was forced to stash this icon, one of the holiest in the world, in a bush. In that period, publishing something like this would likely have seen you face serious censorship, but Anna includes this to dispel accusations of bias. This then leads us to our second point. Anna is criticized as being her father's number one fan. She portrays him as being able to do no wrong or as one of the greatest men to ever live. Having been there for most of her father's reign, Anna assuredly knew that her father was a man of many flaws who made many mistakes. But to describe your father in any way of criticism in the 12th century Roman world would have been almost the same as blaspheming. In the close knit world of the 12th century familiar relations, respect was above all the most important characteristic of familiar relationships. Publicly speaking poor about one's parents was detestable, and to the people of that time, if a son criticized their father, the social consequences would have been great. Now, add on top of that the expectations of a woman in the period to remain apolitical, silent, and to always support their husbands, brothers, and fathers. For a woman to criticize their father would result in that woman's social standing being destroyed, and maybe even her family casting her away. Anna avoids condemnation by exaggerating the greatness of her father. Greatness. This was what leads to her condemnation for exalting her father. Anna avoids condemnation of the social class of her time by using the panegyric style of the time to mask criticism. In the previous example of her father's battle against the Pechenegs, Anna includes the story because of the embarrassment of the event, but describes Alexios' flight from the field as noble, forced by his advisors and guided by God. She describes the stashing of the veil of the Theotokos in a bush as a great and noble deed done to protect the glorious icon, rather than obviously than the obvious leaving behind of a heavy and useless object, as the scene portrays. Anna almost deifies her father to escape any accusation of disrespecting her father. Any criticism of Anna for her elevation of her father ignores the context of the time and the hardship women experienced to receive the same recognition as men. Finally, Anna is accused of not using reliable sources, but this is wildly inaccurate. Firstly, Anna's husband, Nikiforos Vrienios, wrote a history of her father's reign in the First Crusade as well. Anna uses her husband's history as a source, often which includes first-hand accounts of many of the things she writes about. As a woman in the 12th century, it was not socially proper for Anna to speak to men outside of her family to gather information about her history. So instead, she relied on men close to her, like her husband, who was influential in the reign of her father Alexios. Anna did have access to large amounts of primary sources as well. Anna wrote the Alexiad towards the end of her life at the Kecharitomeni monastery in the capital Constantinople. While technically condemned to exile there, Anna was not really out of the grace of her brother John II, the successor to her father. This allowed her to access imperial libraries and archives for sources. In all, Anna is subject to the misogyny and ignorance of later historians. She uses rhetorical and artistic patterns to create an acceptable work of history and to memorialize the reign of her father. Anna uses embarrassing events, panegyric language, and the men of her family to craft a reliable and objective work of history that provides us with crucial information about the reign of the great Emperor Alexius Komnenos and the First Crusade. Therefore, I hope that I have thoroughly convinced you all of Anna Komnene's historical objectivity.